Bill Simpson was a pioneer of motorsports safety equipment, and it all started here in the South Bay. Let's learn about his history and visit the key locations today on PCZ TV. PCZ TV. You know, in its time, the South Bay was the hotbed of hot rod and racers. Everyone from Parnelli Jones to Carroll Shelby. Oh, and to see their footprint, watch these videos. But even manufacturers were here. Toyota, Honda, Nissan all had their national headquarters here in the South Bay. Now, Bill Simpson was famous for safety, and his autobiography is a who's who of racing royalty from about half a century of his career. He was born in Hermosa Beach in 1940, but didn't have the idyllic youth that living in a beach community would imply. He had a self-described hard childhood, shuttling between living with various relatives to his parents' divorce. He quit school around 12 or 13, bounced around between odd jobs, and by 16, started to join in on the local street racing scene. Now, eventually, the street racers moved to drag strips, but this didn't stop them from still testing their vehicles on the city streets. In fact, Bill mentions in his autobiography that he would test drive his hot rod by driving up and down 236th Street in Torrance.
One of my first cars, it was my first car.
Oh man, get out of town.
It was a 44 Deluxe convertible, and I paid $100 for it.
Oh boy.
And that was the car I took to Santa Ana to race.
Wow, that's cool.
And he fell in love with drag racing. Now, back in this era, safety wasn't really top of mind for drivers of any series. And in 1958, he blew his engine on a run at the San Fernando drag strip, and he couldn't stop. He broke both of his arms, which then gave him plenty of time to think about a better way to slow down. Now, his uncle ran an Army surplus store and put him in touch with an expert on parachutes. Now, the expert recommended using a cross-form parachute instead of a round parachute. And Simpson went around but couldn't convince any of the existing safety equipment companies to make it, so
how about new?
He rented a sewing machine from Alberoni Sewing Machine Company in Los Angeles, bought some ripstop nylon, and started sewing parachutes in his garage at 1760 Haynes Lane in Redondo. And what better place to test the concept of a parachute than the streets of Redondo Beach?
And I bought a great big parachute that they dropped like tanks.
Oh wow.
A cargo chute. And so we put that on the back of our tow car. There's a street in Redondo Beach, California. It's called 190th Street. It goes down about 3/8 of a mile, and then it straightens out and goes to Pacific Coast Highway. Well, we're going down that hill doing maybe 80, 90 miles an hour. Mike was driving and I was in the back, and I threw this parachute out. Well, it was a 44-foot canopy.
Oh, jeez.
It picked the back of the car up, and the wind was blowing across the road. It blew us off into a farmer's nursery where he's growing trees and stuff. We knocked a whole bunch of stuff down, killed our car. Dirt stuck up our nose, but neither one of us got hurt, you know.
And after getting bailed out of Redondo Beach jail for these antics, the 18-year-old Bill Simpson started his company. Now, over time, Simpson evolved his business into another safety items such as gloves and helmets, restraints, and shoes. In fact, he designed NASA's first umbilical cords, is where he met astronaut Pete Conrad.
Pete Conrad, who was the commander of one of the Apollo missions, and he walked on the moon, was a friend of mine, and he also was a racer. He raced Formula V's and SCCA. And he came to me and he said, Bill, you know, DuPont has a new material, they call it Nomex, and they're using it for high-speed reentry parachutes. And I said, whoa, you ought to get me some. And he got me some, and We did some preliminary tests with it, and DuPont Nomex was definitely the thing of the future.
And Bill immediately saw the opportunity to make race suits out of it. In 1967, he took an example to Indy and, in typical Bill Simpson marketing fashion, famously set himself on fire to prove that it worked.
A crowd gathered to watch Simpson, who pushed his Nomex race suit to the limit by covering it with gasoline.
He strikes this match and throws it at me, and poof!
All the while, he continued to race, eventually found himself in Indy as a racer. He made 52 career Indy starts from 1968 to 1977 and finished 13th in the 1974 Indy 500. Meanwhile, his company grew and he moved his shop to Harbor City, and he ended up naming a small collection of garages Simpson Gasoline Alley. Then he expanded into Torrance in 1968. In fact, the man seemed to migrate all around the South Bay more than anybody I know. Now, despite a worldwide reputation for quality and research, Simpson still found himself defending multiple lawsuits. His worst crisis, though, came in February of 2001, when his good friend Dale Earnhardt was killed on the final corner of the Daytona 500. Not only did he lose a friend, but he found himself being blamed by NASCAR for the tragedy. He then severed his ties with Simpson Race Products and sued NASCAR for defamation. In September of 2001, after the dust settled, he started a new safety business, Impact Racing.
The legendary Bill Impact Simpson in the Speed Freaks pits. And that's still odd for me to use Impact with the name Simpson.
But it's a Bill Simpson company.
No, back to the South Bay now. During his time in the South Bay, he had a boat that he kept at King Harbor. And famously, he got a wee bit inebriated and ran it into the Portofino Sea Bucket restaurant. Oopsie. Now, in a fun South Bay twist, the Portofino was owned by one-time racer Mary Davis, and it was also the destination of the Cannonball Run. And it was also featured in the 1981 movie, Cannonball Run. So let's take a look at the locations today. The garage that started it all didn't survive. In the 1970s, this whole area of Redondo was totally redeveloped, and the garage that started the parachute program was torn down. The sprawling nursery full of trees on 190th Street, well, there's still a nursery underneath the power lines on the far western side. Now, he also had a shop at 2415 Amsler, which, ironically, was next to one of the South Bay locations of Taco Bell's headquarters. And you can see more about Taco Bell in the South Bay here. The facility in Harbor City that made the race suits is now closed. His gasoline alley, though, is still open and has several automotive companies, but I don't know if the firm still owns it. Not sure which slip was his in King Harbor, but the Portofino that he crashed into has changed dramatically in the intervening years. And the restaurant isn't called the Sea Bucket anymore, but it still has lovely views of the sailboats. Simpson Race Products purchased Twisted Stitch, a seat company that was based in Torrance, but it was shut down during the vid. And speaking of Simpson Race Products, the company that now bears his name is now headquartered in New Braunfels, Texas. So it appears that the Simpson name has all but disappeared from the South Bay, but at one time, this man certainly had a big South footprint. Is that a word? It is now. A big footprint here in the South Bay. If you've been watching this far, I thank you.
Bye.